Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Basic Education Board.
Hello students, you're welcome to the TV learning program. As usual, I'm teacher Herbert, who is going to be taking you through a biology lesson and health science for senior 3. And the unit lesson is unit 10. And on that unit, we're going to discuss about the skin and homeostasis. I think you do remember we discussed about the skin and its function. We talked about temperature regulation. That was lesson 1. The lesson 2, we had to discuss about control of internal environment within an organism. We also mentioned about how do the body try to balance the amount of water in the body. That was the last lesson, which was lesson 2. Now the lesson 3 of the unit, which is ending unit 10 of skin and homeostasis, is control of glucose level in the blood. That is the unit, that is the lesson we're going to discuss today. I know some of you, where do we normally get the glucose? When you eat food that contains glucose, the foods that contains glucose, examples are carbohydrates, a carbohydrate food. Once you eat a carbohydrate food in your diet, the level of glucose in the blood increases. All right? So the learning objectives of the lesson of today, we're going to explain the control of glucose level in the blood. All right? We also have to interpret the graph of control of glucose level in the blood. Because once the glucose level is not controlled in the blood, it can destroy our tissues. It can destroy our tissues, so we have to try by all means to strike a balance, to balance the glucose level in the blood. What are the organs that are responsible for controlling the glucose level in the blood? Let's talk about the organs that are responsible, the organs that are responsible for controlling, or can talk about controlling or regulating the glucose level in the blood. All right? They are students. Let us remind those organs. Because once food is taken, once the carbohydrates, the carbs are taken in our body, they have to be broken down. And once they are broken down in the smaller intestines, they have to be absorbed into the bloodstream. And once the glucose level that increases in the bloodstream, it can damage our body tissues. So some of the organs that are responsible for regulating the body, the glucose level or the glucose concentration in the blood we have, number 1 is the pancreas. And I know some of you know what a pancreas. The pancreas is an organ that is located below the stomach. And the pancreas serves 2 functions. 1, it serves as an endocrine gland. All right? If I talk about endocrine gland, it means it is a gland that produces hormones. Another way, the pancreas is also an exocrine gland because it secretes what we call pancreatic juice. And this pancreatic juice plays a very important functions as far as digestion is concerned. All right? Another organ that is playing a role in regulating the glucose level in the blood or regulating the glucose concentration in the blood, we have the liver. All right? So we're going to discuss about how these 2 organs work together to regulate the blood glucose in the body. I said the blood glucose level is important in the body because it is a source of energy of cells. cells need energy for doing their functions, all right? If the cells, they don't have energy, they cannot perform their function properly or effectively. We know that the normal blood glucose level required in the body for normal cell functioning is within a narrow range between 90 to 100 milligram per in the blood. So it means that if you are trying to understand, I said glucose is very important in the body because it is a source of energy for cell respiration. The normal blood glucose level required in the body for normal cell function is kept within a narrow range of 90 to 100 milligram per 100 milliliters of blood. So that is the normal glucose level that is needed in the blood. Once it drops below 90 to 100 milligram per blood, it means you have less glucose in the blood. Once that one it drops down, it means that the cells will not function properly. And once it goes above 90 to 100 milligram per 100 milliliters of blood, it means you have a high glucose level in the blood. So the body does by all means to regulate the glucose level in the blood by producing some hormones, as I'm going to mention some hormone that plays a very important role to regulate the glucose level in the blood. I said the source of glucose in the body, as I mentioned earlier, it depends on the foods that we feed on. Let me say you are taking your breakfast. Your breakfast you have taken today, it contains carbohydrates. These carbohydrates will increase the glucose level in the blood. And I said once the glucose level increases in the blood, what happens, student? It means our body tissues are going to be damaged. So the body tries by all means to strike a balance, to balance the glucose level so that our body tissue should not be damaged or should not be destroyed. I said the end product of digestion of carbohydrates can increase the glucose level in the blood. I said it is broken down and it is absorbed into the bloodstream from the ileum, as I mentioned it, the small intestine. This raises the blood glucose level. It also raises the glucose in the tissue fluid. The glucose in the tissue fluid will increase, as well as the glucose in the bloodstream also increase, all right? So it means that the body has to do by all means to regulate, to balance the amount of glucose in the body so that some of the body tissues will not be damaged. And how does body go about that? To balance the amount of glucose in the blood, all right? Let me say during exercise or during starvation, you are starving, you are doing exercise. When you are doing exercise, you need more glucose. When you are starving, you also need glucose. So the glucose in the blood is used up by the cells during respiration. Have you understood? I said the glucose that is produced in the blood is going to be used by cell respiration. I know you know what is called cell respiration, the chemical breakdown of food to release energy. And that energy is going to be used by cell during respiration, all right? This can lead to a drop below when you are starving, when you are doing exercise. Student, you understand what I'm saying? When you are doing exercise, when you are starving, that is during starvation, when you are feeding properly, when you are eating food which does not contain carbohydrates, what will happen? It will cause the dropping down of glucose in the blood. And now the body has to try by all means to raise up the glucose level in the blood. All right? As I mentioned, that is to say, let us try to understand what I'm trying to mention exactly. I said during exercise or during starvation, the glucose in the blood is used up by the cells for respiration. This can lead to drop below the normal. As I said, the normal blood glucose is ranging from 90 to 100 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood. So if it drops down, that is during starvation. When it drops down, what will happen? Meaning that we're going to have a less glucose in the blood, and eventually, which will affect the normal functioning of the cells. All right? I said 2 liters of glucose in the blood can make osmotic pressure lower than the normal. The lower the osmotic pressure to drop down. And if it drops down, what will happen? It will affect the normal functioning of the cell. This causes the cells to gain too much water. And after it gains too much water, what will happen? This will affect their normal functioning, as I mentioned. So once the osmotic pressure increases within the cell, it will normally cause the absorbing more water. And if it absorbs more water, what will happen? It will affect their normal functioning. Have you understood? So now, not to affect the normal functioning of the cells, the body has to work in hand with some of the organs and some of the cells to function properly so that the glucose has to be balanced properly. Have you understood? Let's go to the pancreas, as I mentioned. The pancreas is an organ that is located below the stomach. And student, I said the pancreas is a body organ which plays 2 roles. Secretion of the pancreas does 2 functions. Secretion of pancreatic juice, all right? Another function of the pancreas, it produces hormones. And these hormones are very important as far as regulation of glucose is concerned. It also produces what you call hormones. It produces hormones. And students have mentioned that word several times. What is a hormone? A chemical substance or a chemical messenger produced by the endocrine gland. Let us go through this. I said the pancreas is an organ which plays 2 roles. Secretion of pancreatic juice, and I know we discussed in a previous lesson, the pancreatic juice plays very many functions. Chemical breakdown of food plays a function in a digestion, all right? And also secretion of hormones. Take an example, the 2 hormones produced by the pancreas. The pancreas produces 2 hormones. Pancreas produces 2 hormones. 2 hormones. These 2 hormones, we have the insulin, and also have the glycogen. Glycagon. Sorry, it is glycagon. The glycagon, all right? Which is the glycagon, all right? So that hormone that I said, there is a glycagon and also the insulin. The liver and the pancreas plays a role in regulating the amount of glucose in the body, in the blood. So get me very well. I said the 2 organs I'm talking about. I'm talking about the pancreas. I'm talking about the liver. So these 2 organs, they work antagonistically to regulate, to balance the amount of glucose in the blood. Have you understood? I said these 2 organs, the 2 hormones, which is the insulin and also the glycagon, are the 2 hormones that are produced by the pancreas. And these 2 hormones are very important to balance the amount of glucose in the bloodstream, all right? Another part of the pancreas that contains the cells, once these cells are stimulated, I'm talking about the cells which is called the islets of Langerhans. I'm specifying these cells, which is called islets of Langerhans. They are found in the pancreas. And once these parts also contains 2 types of cells. One is called alpha cells, another one is called the beta cells. The beta cells produces insulin. Then the alpha cells produces glycogen. Glycogen is a hormone, and also insulin is a hormone. All right? I said these cells are released 2 types of hormones into the blood. The 2 cells that are found by the islets of Langerhans, they produce two hormones. One is insulin, another one is glycagon, all right? These two hormones are responsible, and they are produced by the pancreas, and they are responsible for balancing the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. These two hormones, the insulins and the glycagon, respectively, their role is to regulate the blood glucose level, and that brings what you call negative feedback. Negative feedback is responsible for decreasing or diminishing the effect that causes either the rise of glucose level or the increase of the glucose level. All right? Let me try to draw the graph here. I have two graphs. Let me say we have here the blood glucose level. Okay? On that side, I have with time. As time goes on, what happens? Let me maybe have, there is something, the blood glucose level is increasing to normal. What happens? The body has to do by all means to take it back to the normal size. Let me have another graph that is with time. I have another graph which is drawn like that. Let me say this is blood glucose level. Now, once the blood glucose level drops, that is, the blood glucose level is dropping down, it is needed also to be raised up to the normal so that it cannot affect the cells. Quickly, let's talk about, I said these cells are normally the beta cells. Under the influence of glycogen, it converts the stored glycogen to glucose. Let me talk about that thing. We have the glycogen. The glycagon is a hormone. Then glycogen, these are large molecules. These are large molecules of glucose. All right? Once there is excess glucose in the blood, it has to be converted to glycogen, and is going to be stored where? To the liver. I said, as I mentioned it, under the influence of glycagon, it can convert the stored glycogen to glucose when the blood sugar levels are below the normal. Once the blood glucose level is very low, the other stored glycogen has to be converted back to glucose, and which is going to be used by the body cells. On reaching to the liver, the insulin also stimulates the conversion of excessive glucose to glycogen. Once there is excessive glucose in the blood, what happens, the student? What happens is this. It will convert the excessive glucose to glycogen, and is going to be stored in the liver. And in muscle tissues, insulin also causes some excessive glucose to be converted to glycogen for storage. So that excessive glucose that are found in the muscles can also be converted to glycogen and is going to be stored in where? In the liver. It also increases respiration in tissues. That is, when there is excessive glucose, metabolic activities also increases. And once the metabolic activity also increases, it means the glucose level will just be lowered down. And it also increases the respiration in tissues to break down the excessive glucose to carbon dioxide and water. So that excessive glucose can also be in tissues can also be broken down into carbon dioxide and water. Let's have a chart. We have a chart, the process of lowering of the level of blood glucose back to normal. We're going to have two sides. One will just be showing how to increase the glucose level in the blood. Another one is how to lower down the glucose level in the blood. We have a chart. This is a normal glucose level. So the normal glucose level is ranging from 90 to 100 milligrams per 100 milliliters of the blood. So we have, this is a time of starvation. When you talk about time of starvation or during exercise, the glucose used up from the blood will just be very low. And how will the body go about that to increase the glucose level in the blood? The blood glucose level drops below normal. And now what will happen? That one will be detected by the pancreas, and after detecting by the pancreas, now what will happen? It will produce a hormone, and that hormone, I said it is called, the hormone is called glycagon. The glycagon will just stimulate. The glycagon causes the liver to convert the other stored glycogen to glucose. The second process is reducing metabolic processes. That is, the other metabolic processes has to be reduced, all right? And now the glucose level will just go to a normal level. On that side, that is to say, when the glucose level in the blood is very high, we have very many people who are suffering from diabetes. That is a condition when the glucose level in the blood is very high. And what causes that? What causes the glucose level to be very high in the blood, all right? It means that you are eating food which contains more of carbohydrates or more carbohydrate foods. That one will increase the glucose level in the blood. Heavy carbohydrates meal, more glucose from the digestive system enters into the blood. And how would the body do? The blood glucose level raises above the normal. And once it raises above the normal, what will happen? It will be detected by the pancreas. And the pancreas will be able to produce more insulin hormone are going to be released into the blood. And once they are released into the blood, what happens? Now the insulin causes the liver organ to convert the excessive glucose to glycogen. I said glycogen, these are large molecules of glucose. Then glycagon is a hormone. Then I said metabolized excess glucose to carbon dioxide. The other excess glucose that are found in tissues and muscles has to be converted to carbon dioxide and water, and is going to be removed from the body as waste product. And then converting more glucose to fats. Also, there's what you call conversion of excessive glucose to fats, and they're going to be stored in adipose tissues, all right, in the skin. So in that way, the glucose level will just go back to normal. So that is a diagram that summarizes the process of regulating glucose level in the blood. So simply, the glucose level is balanced by two things: the insulin lowering the glucose level in the bloodstream, glycagon increasing the glucose level in the bloodstream. So here we have when the level of glucose or blood glucose goes below normal, it stimulates the pancreas to secrete glycagon and stops the secretion of the insulin. Once the glucose level in the blood is very low, there is a stopping of the production of the insulin and the production of glycagon, which will just increase the glucose level in the blood. I said the glycagon has the following effects. In the liver, it stimulates conversion of some of the stored glycogen to glucose, which is raised into the blood. Another one is reducing the respiration in the cell. So that's the effect of glycagon on the liver is opposite of the insulin. So insulin lowers down the glucose level. Glycagon increases the level of glucose in the blood. So they work oppositely. So glycagon, I said, raises the low levels of blood glucose to normal, where insulin lowers high level of blood glucose. In simply, let's talk about what will happen, what is the disease. The disease that is caused by high level of glucose in the blood, when the insulin are not performing their functions efficiently. What is the deficiency or what is the disease? The disease is called diabetes mellitus. You remember, I said when there's too much water in the blood, you suffer from diabetes insipidus. Then when it is too much glucose in the blood, you suffer from diabetes mellitus. This condition is in which the pancreas fails to produce an adequate insulin or no insulin, and this may be due to hereditary reasons or a disease, all right? When the islets of Langerhans are not performing their functions efficiently. And we have, in this case, it is referred to as type 1 diabetes. We have type 1 diabetes and we have type 2 diabetes. There is another type of diabetes, which is known as type 2 diabetes, where the person suffers diabetes due to lack of exercise or obesity. When you are lacking exercise and you have obesity, it is a malnutrition disease. When you eat too much carbohydrates and you become overweight, can also lead into suffering from diabetes mellitus. And a person with diabetes mellitus has abnormal high level of glucose in his blood. All right? So these are the signs and symptoms of what you call hypoglycemia. We have passing of urine frequently, constant feeling satiety, dehydration, loss of weight, and poor resistance to infections. And that one can lead into what you call glucuria. That's what's supposed to be sweat. So it can be treated by using insulin hormones and other small things, all right? What can we do? What are good nutrition habits that reduces the risks of diabetes? That is supposed to be doing exercise, eating food that are raw with animal fats. You eat food which are unsaturated fats. The last one is avoiding simple sugars, eating protein sources, getting vegetable proteins, as well as visit the doctor regularly and medical checkups. So we have a number of assignments. Number one is insulin hormone is used to manage diabetes condition, suggests the reason why insulin is not taken orally, its administration. If a person enhances original stimulus, the system is classified as a dash feedback mechanism. We have neutral, we have polarized, we have positive, we have negative. I said insulin and glycogen are antagonistic hormones because they increase and decrease dash. That is potassium, potassium, glucose, and cell metabolism. The last number is name the symptoms of diabetes mellitus. So students, thank you very much for watching and being attentive in my lesson, and I wish you the best of your day.